I'm standing at the edge of a small patch of woods on a cold morning, and I've got a winter's worth of firewood stacked behind me, enough to heat a house through the whole season, and it cost me nothing. No propane delivery, no oil truck, no gas bill, no electric heat pump humming money out of my wallet. And here's the part that sounds impossible. I cut this wood from these exact trees last year, and the year before that, and I'll cut it from them again next year, and the year after, and so will whoever owns this land in 100 years. Because these trees do not die when you cut them. They grow back. Cut them right, and they grow back stronger and faster than before, forever. This is the closest thing to free fuel that exists on this earth. It's how people heated their homes for thousands of years, and the Amish family down the road has been doing it on the same little woodlot since before the electric lines ever reached this valley. They never forgot it. The rest of us did. After the rocket stove video, a lot of you said the same thing. Gary, an efficient stove is great, but I'm still buying the wood, or I'm still paying for gas. Where does the actual free fuel come from? Fair question. The stove is how you burn it. This is where it comes from. And the answer is a piece of forgotten knowledge so simple it's almost a joke, except it happens to be true. Here's the number that should stop you cold. Heating your home is, for most people, the single biggest energy bill of the year. Hundreds, sometimes well over $1,000 a winter, every winter, for as long as you own a home, paid to a gas company or an oil company or the power company. Money that leaves your hands and never comes back. Add it up over 30 years, and you've handed over the price of a car, maybe two, just to not be cold. And the whole time, the sun is pouring energy down onto every acre of land, and trees are quietly catching that energy and storing it as wood. The only solar battery that builds itself, for free, while you sleep. We've been taught that the only real fuel comes out of a pipe or a wire with a meter on it. It doesn't. The oldest fuel there is grows back on its own, and almost nobody under the age of 80 knows how to make it do that anymore. So here's the trick, and it's called coppicing. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Most broadleaf trees, your oaks, ashes, maples, hazels, willows, alders, black locust, and many more, have a remarkable ability. If you cut them down to a low stump while they're dormant in winter, they do not give up and rot. The roots are still alive, still huge, still full of stored energy, and in the spring, that stump erupts with a whole cluster of fast-growing new shoots. Not one trunk slowly starting over, a dozen vigorous poles shooting up out of an established root system that's already decades old, growing faster than any seedling ever could. In a handful of years, depending on the tree, those poles are firewood-sized. You cut them again, and the stump, we call it a stool, sends up another flush, and you do it again, and again, on a cycle for the rest of your life. The stool doesn't wear out. Quite the opposite. A regularly coppiced stool can outlive a normal tree many times over. There are coppice stools in Europe that have been cut on rotation for 1,000 years and are still going. You are not killing the tree to get the wood. You are pruning it, and it thanks you by growing you more. The system around it is just as simple. You take your patch of woods and you divide it into sections. Say the wood is ready to cut every 8 years. Then you split your woodlot into 8 sections and you cut one section each winter. By the time you've worked through all 8, the first one you cut has regrown and is ready again, and you start the rotation over. Every single year you get a winter's worth of firewood. The woodlot is never bare, and it never runs out, because you're harvesting the regrowth, not the trees. It is a perpetual fuel machine made of living wood, powered by sunlight, and it costs you nothing but the work of cutting and the patience to let it grow. If you've got livestock that would eat the new shoots, you do the same thing but cut higher up, above their reach. That's called pollarding, and it works exactly the same way. Plant fast growers like willow or black locust, and you'll be cutting your first poles in just a few years. Black locust especially is a homestead favorite because it grows fast, coppices hard, burns nearly as hot as coal, and even feeds the soil. And how much land does it take? Honestly, less than you'd guess. A well-managed acre of good coppice can sustainably hand you something on the order of a cord or more of firewood a year, every year, without ever depleting. And a typical home heating with wood might burn a few cords a winter. So we're not talking about needing a forest. A few acres of worked woodlot, cut on rotation, can keep a house warm indefinitely. Treat those as rough numbers. Your climate, your species, your stove, and your house all change them. But the point stands. This is a backyard to small acreage thing, not a logging operation. Now, here's what nobody tells you about that little woodlot, and it's the part that changed how I look at land entirely. It gives you a whole lot more than heat. The very same poles you're growing for firewood are also fence posts, bean poles, trellises, tomato stakes, and tool handles. And a black locust post will stand in the wet ground for decades without rotting, which is why the old-timers prized it. The crooked bits and the small stuff become your kindling. Cut a few fresh hardwood logs in late winter, drill a grid of holes in them, plug them with mushroom spawn, and stand them in the shade, and that same coppice will grow you gourmet shiitake and oyster mushrooms for years off wood you'd otherwise have burned. Free food from the trimmings. The leafy branches, cut in summer and dried, were once stored as what they called tree hay, to feed goats and sheep and cattle through the winter back before anybody baled grass. A genuinely forgotten trick that small farms are starting to rediscover. Willow and hazel, cut thin and flexible, bend into baskets and woven hurdle fencing the way they have for 1,000 years. And the woodlot quietly feeds itself. The leaves and the brash you leave behind rot down into rich soil. The nitrogen-fixing trees like locust and alder fertilize the ground around them for free, and that endless cut and regrow cycle creates some of the best wildlife habitat there is. Worked coppice woodland teems with butterflies and songbirds precisely because it's being cut. So understand what you're really building here. You are not just growing fuel. You are growing heat and building material and tools and food and animal feed and soil and shelter for wildlife, all off one patch of ground, all of it renewing itself on its own, all of it free for the rest of your life after the work of starting it. One small stand of managed trees is, pound for pound, just about the most generous thing a person can own. And how much land does it take? Honestly, less than you'd guess. A well-managed acre of good coppice can sustainably hand you something on the order of a cord or more of firewood a year, every year, without ever depleting. And a typical home heating with wood might burn a few cords a winter. So we're not talking about needing a forest. A few acres of worked woodlot, cut on rotation, can keep a house warm indefinitely. Treat those as rough numbers. Your climate, your species, your stove, and your house all change them. But the point stands. This is a backyard to small acreage thing, not a logging operation. Now here's what nobody tells you about that little woodlot, and it's the part that changed how I look at land entirely. It gives you a whole lot more than heat. The very same poles you're growing for firewood are also fence posts, bean poles, trellises, tomato stakes, and tool handles. And a black locust post will stand in the wet ground for decades without rotting, which is why the old-timers prized it. The crooked bits and the small stuff become your kindling. Cut a few fresh hardwood logs in late winter, drill a grid of holes in them, plug them with mushroom spawn, and stand them in the shade, and that same coppice will grow you gourmet shiitake and oyster mushrooms for years off wood you'd otherwise have burned. Free food from the trimmings. The leafy branches, cut in summer and dried, were once stored as what they called tree hay to feed goats and sheep and cattle through the winter back before anybody baled grass. A genuinely forgotten trick that small farms are starting to rediscover. Willow and hazel, cut thin and flexible, bend into baskets and woven hurdle fencing the way they have for 1,000 years. And the woodlot quietly feeds itself. The leaves and the brash you leave behind rot down into rich soil. The nitrogen-fixing trees like locust and alder fertilize the ground around them for free. And that endless cut and regrow cycle creates some of the best wildlife habitat there is. Worked coppice woodland teems with butterflies and songbirds precisely because it's being cut. So understand what you're really building here. You are not just growing fuel. You are growing heat and building material and tools and food and animal feed and soil and shelter for wildlife, all off one patch of ground, all of it renewing itself on its own, all of it free for the rest of your life after the work of starting it. One small stand of managed trees is, pound for pound, just about the most generous thing a person can own. This isn't some fringe idea. This is how the world stayed warm before coal. Coppicing is one of the oldest things humans have ever done with land. There are wooden trackways preserved in the bogs of Britain, built 6,000 years ago out of coppiced poles, all cut to the same size, from people managing their woods on rotation in the Stone Age. All through the Middle Ages, entire economies ran on coppice. Firewood, charcoal for the blacksmiths, poles for fences and tools, all of it cut forever off the same managed woods. Every farm had its woodlot, and you cut your share each winter, and it grew back, generation after generation. And then we found coal, and then oil, and then gas, and then the grid, and all of it was so cheap and so easy that within a couple of generations, we simply stopped. The woodlots grew wild or got cleared, the knowledge stopped getting passed down, and we handed our heat over to a meter. The energy companies were thrilled because a tree that regrows your fuel for free, forever, is the one product they can never sell you. There's no recurring revenue in a woodlot. There's a lifetime of recurring revenue in a gas line. Now, the honest part, and on this one you really have to listen, because this is the episode where the work is real, and so is the danger. First, the obvious limit. This takes land, and it takes time. If you're in an apartment, this one isn't for you, and I won't pretend otherwise, though even a hedgerow or a few trees along a fence line can be coppiced for some of your fuel. And it is not instant. If you're planting from scratch, you're years from your first real harvest. This is the long game, the thing you start now so that future you, and maybe your kids, are warm for free. The best time to plant a coppice was 20 years ago. The second best time is this spring. Second, and this is the one I need you to take seriously, cutting trees and processing firewood is genuinely one of the most dangerous things you can do around a home. Chainsaws cause terrible injuries. Trees and limbs fall in ways that kill people every single year, and a dead branch hung up in a canopy, a widowmaker they call it, and they named it that for a reason, can come down on you without warning. Coppicing small, young poles is far safer than felling big timber, and that's part of why I like it. But if you're taking down anything of size, or you're new to a chainsaw, get proper training or hire someone who knows what they're doing. No amount of free firewood is worth your hand or your life. Third, burning it. Wood heat is only clean, safe, and efficient if you do three things right. You burn dry, seasoned wood, split it and let it sit under cover for at least 6 months to a year because wet green wood smolders, throws off little heat, and coats your chimney in creosote. You keep your chimney and flue properly installed and swept because creosote buildup is what causes chimney fires, and those burn houses down. And you put a carbon monoxide detector in the house because any combustion appliance can produce CO, and CO is invisible and it kills silently. Dry wood, clean chimney, CO detector. Those aren't optional. And know that wood smoke is a real air quality issue. Burn hot and clean with dry wood, and check your local rules because some areas regulate wood burning. And a couple of practical truths so you don't waste years. This works on broadleaf hardwood type trees. It does not work on most conifers, your pines and spruces and firs, which generally just die when you cut them, so don't try to coppice your Christmas tree. And before you plant, check what's right for your area, because a few of the best firewood trees, black locust among them, are considered invasive in some regions. Plant what your local extension office blesses, not just what grows fastest. Before I tell you about Eli, the man who taught me all of this, everything I've built on this channel is now in one place. The cooling system, the rocket stove, the root cellar, the rain barrels, all of it. Every method, every plan. It's at garystips.com, link in the description. But stay here, because Eli is the whole reason I know any of this. Eli's the Amish fellow whose farm backs onto the same land I'm standing on. And the first winter I knew him, I asked him what he paid to heat that big farmhouse full of kids. He looked at me like I'd asked him what he paid for air. He doesn't pay anything. He never has. He's got a woodlot out back, maybe a couple of acres, and every winter he and his boys go out and cut one section of it, and they haul it in, and it heats the house and cooks the food all year. And in the spring, that section starts growing right back. And then he told me the part that I have not stopped thinking about since. He pointed at the oldest, gnarliest stools in that woodlot, these low, wide, ancient-looking stumps bristling with new growth. And he told me his great-grandfather cut firewood off those same stools, the same living trees. 4 generations of one family, kept warm through 4 generations of winters by trees that never died, on a piece of ground that has never once received a fuel bill. He said his great-grandfather's hands and his hands had touched the same wood 80 years apart, and it was still growing. I've thought about a lot of clever tricks on this channel. I've never seen anything that humbled me like that little patch of woods. That's the knowledge we threw away for the convenience of a pipe in the wall. For as long as people have been cold, the answer was a tree that grows your fuel back, freely, forever, asking only that you cut it right and wait. There was never a moment when it stopped working. The trees never lost the ability. We just lost the habit, in 2 short generations of cheap oil, and called the oldest renewable fuel on Earth old-fashioned. But a coppice stool doesn't know it's old-fashioned. It just keeps doing what it's done for 10,000 years, turning sunlight into firewood for free for anyone with the patience to let it. They didn't lose this, we did, and the trees are still standing there, ready to start the moment we remember. So drop your state in the comments and tell me what you've got: acreage, a woodlot gone wild, a fence line, or just a dream of land someday. And tell me what you pay to heat your home every winter, because I think it'll shock some people to add it up. And if your family ever had a woodlot, or you remember someone who heated entirely with their own wood, tell me about it, because that's exactly the knowledge I'm trying to keep from disappearing. If you believe your own heat shouldn't have to come with a monthly bill for the rest of your life, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe. Because next week, I'm showing you how those same homesteaders turn a pile of manure and kitchen scraps into free cooking gas you can light on your stove. The fuel that quite literally comes out of the garbage, and the one the gas company would very much prefer you never learn to make.